Welcome to the EchoCast. I am Bond, and I am here to chat with you about video games, gaming, news, speculation, and much more. This week, we'll be talking about the podcast Big Milestone, new throwback Assassin's Creed games, The Last of Us Remake's reception, and much more. A few things before we get into the show. A big thank you to the supporter level patrons, PK, Man-Made Golf, The Dawn, and the newest supporter, Caged Nephilim. A special thanks to our producer level patron, Hassan. If you are interested in supporting the show, my other content, and the other perks that come along with it, go ahead and check out my Patreon at patreon.com/BonDiesel. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform, and if you're on Spotify or iTunes, please rate the podcast. On YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment down below, even if it's just for the algorithm, but especially if you have a question, comment, or topic for next week. Last, please join the show's Discord to chat about the show, gaming news, sports, or whatever else you want to. The link is down in the description for that. Gaming news. So to start off, this is the 200th episode of the EchoCast. So there it is. That's exciting. So just to kind of talk about the podcast a little bit in case you're newer or whatever. So I went back and did a little bit of research for this. I published the first episode back in March 22nd of 2018. So it's roughly 4.5 years ago. That's really cool. And it was like, I want to say it was over 100 episodes without ever missing a week. That included going to E3 and doing a whole bunch of stuff. I believe it even included the birth of my child. I'm pretty sure I still recorded that week. And I know there were a few episodes I recorded literally from the couch while like holding her. And I recorded it on some Samsung earbuds on that mic, and it was terrible, but it worked, and we're still doing it. So I've obviously taken a few weeks off here and there over the last couple of years, but 200 episodes is really exciting. And it's evolved a lot, right? If you've been around for a long time, you know that. If you haven't, you may not. So this started off initially as a Division podcast. It was actually, I started doing it before Division 2 was even officially announced. And it was before I even got notice that I was going to be an Ubisoft star player. So that was highly convenient and probably definitely helped kind of get the show going early. And then, the Division 2 came out. Still my best performing episode ever is still the one, the week that the Division 2 came out. It has like a few thousand listens, which for me is a whole lot. It's about 10 times what I typically get. And so that was exciting. And at that time I was monetized as well. So I made a few bucks off of that. And, we carried through the first year and I believe year 2 of the Division. And, it just got to a point where info was slowing down, trying to find something to talk about every week turned into this like slog where I was having to go like multiple weeks of literally just like coming up with stuff to talk about, because a big topic was typically the state of the game, which for a long time was happening every week, and then that fell off, and so I decided I wanted to keep doing this, but that I needed to diversify the content. And so I believe I couldn't find an exact episode, but it was around last May of 2021 when I finally kind of started covering a lot of things. Now, that would put about the last year and a half or so I've been doing that, and that's had its ups and downs. If you've listened for a while, I've experimented with, how I record it, the order of stuff, what I talk about, and what I'm happy with now is I think I have it in a good spot where I can talk about anything gaming related, whatever I feel like, what we're doing right now, essentially. And then I basically try to make a segment for The Division and Mass Effect every week. Because the problem with being a 100% generalized podcast is that you're going up against like most of the biggest gaming podcasts, the Kind of Funny podcast, MinMax, Giant Bomb, Jeff Grubb, all of these people who either have like legitimate like insider info or have multiple people on the podcast. If you're listening to this right now, and if you listen to any other podcast, you know that there's not too many solo podcasts out there. There can't be very many who have recorded 200 episodes. And for any of the detailed people, this really is episode like 205 or something. But I started counting the interviews as like special episodes. And so for the weekly podcast, this is the 200th. And so I understand that, this format isn't really the most popular in the world. I understand that if I had, one or two or three more people on every week with me, it would probably be more attractive to people. It's just scheduling wise, it doesn't make sense for me. I basically am doing this because I fit it in when I can. And the idea of trying to schedule with two or three people is just not realistic. So I think I've really settled on this kind of way of doing it where I do interviews when I can get them. And I'm really proud of those. I think they've gone really well. I've learned a lot in a couple months of interviewing. I definitely wish I would have maybe interviewed like Yannick and Mark Dara later. I wish I would have done some other interviews first so I could learn both a tech perspective and from my own interviewing ability, because it's a talent, right? To interview people. It may come naturally to some people, but for most people there is there's something you have to learn. There's a strategy and I don't know, like experience that you have to have, because anyone can just ask questions, but asking good follow-up questions, providing your own insight, doing things that makes the conversation feel natural and informative and stuff is really hard. And I feel like I've struggled with that stuff in the interview so far, but I think I'm getting better at it. And so a little part of me wishes I would have maybe saved like Mark Dara for a later interview when I am a little more in my groove, but here we are. That was a great show. I was really happy with it. Some technical stuff I wish would have been better, but that's okay. And that's kind of where we're at now. We're still doing this weekly podcast. I will talk about some news here in a moment. I will also say that in the listener questions segment, I basically did like an AMA, and a pretty good number of people responded. So there's a bunch of questions, both gaming related and not, that I'll be answering towards the end of the show. I am going to do, the timestamps. So at least in the YouTube version, you'll see timestamps. I may just throw them into the podcast version as well, because why not? So be on the lookout for that if you just want to skip to the questions or to one of the other sections. So, and as for where the podcast is going, I'll maybe talk more about this in one of the listener questions, because that's, I believe someone asked about it. But I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. 200 episodes is a milestone. It's not the ending. I think that this podcast will continue being a general podcast that really focuses on The Division and Mass Effect. I think as the years go on over the next 2 or 3 years, if I continue doing it, we'll obviously see a pretty big lean towards Mass Effect, because that we know has a new game coming out. The Division in theory has this big like whole universe that's being built around it. I am not hyper confident in that providing something that I can really hang my hat on creation wise. And I will say I do want to kind of go back to that move. When I went from the Division to doing more stuff, it wasn't because I didn't like the Division anymore. I've seen people even say that, like on the subreddit and stuff like that, like, oh yeah, he's a Mass Effect fan now. Obviously I am. That's not a lie, but I still like the Division. I love it. Maybe it's more so because of my memories of it, or because of the people I've met through it, both developers and other players. I still like playing the game. I just don't play it that much. And it's because before I switched over, when I was still trying to do a Division only podcast, I was getting toxic and I was getting sensational, and I was doing what you've seen every single the Division YouTuber and streamer, most, not every single, that's not true, but many of them, especially the legacy ones, the ones that have been around forever. I just think that you can see that these people are burnt out, and I think you can see that they, when you're faced with a decision or the task of being creative or kind of taking the easier path, whether it's due to a lack of creativity or just a lack of time or whatever, it just seems like when people get burned out and when people have tried to stick with a game like the Division that doesn't have a lot going on, people go down this easy path of negativity, toxicity, sensationalism, straight up dishonesty. And I didn't want to go there. So that's why I diversified. It hurt my content, like it hurt my interaction and my numbers and stuff for sure. The podcast I think is basically back now to where it was before I changed. But it took a year and a half or more. And it's still not as consistent. If I make a Division video today on YouTube, it's going to get 10 times as many views as if I make a Mass Effect or a different one. And that's fine. I don't care enough about that stuff to only do Division videos. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I'm happy that you're listening, and I'm good with this. And this is what we're going to be doing for the foreseeable future. I'll keep talking about everything. I'll keep talking about Division. I'll keep talking about Mass Effect. And as those things have developments, we'll focus on one or the other a bit more. So, just a big thank you. If you're listening, thank you so much for listening to all these shows and supporting however you do. Even if you just listen, that's more than enough. If you want to support in other ways, that's great. But just listening is really the best thing you can do. So thank you. Okay, news time. Let's actually talk about some games. So Assassin's Creed Mirage has been announced. Assassin's Creed Mirage is we don't know much about it yet. Okay, so the only thing we really have so far is a bunch of rumors, which I won't dive too much into. We do have, I think, what is cover art, and in the most speculative of ways, it shows a very classic looking assassin diving down with the blade off the wrist at someone, and myself, as well as many others, as well as the rumors, are suggesting that we think this may be a sign that they are returning to some kind of to the roots of the Assassin's Creed games. If you have played all of the Assassin's Creed games, or are at least aware of them, you'll know that for many years now, for many years it was a very like story, almost linear game that would take place in a big city. You would assassinate targets leading up to one big one. You would have tools and mechanics and things like that to use. And then with Origins, they started kind of leaning towards more of like a looter RPG-ish kind of thing. And then with Odyssey, they went all in on that. And then with Valhalla, they went like super all in on that. I really like Origins. I think it's partially because it still does have some of that. It still felt like an old Assassin's Creed game, even though they were introducing more mystical things and things like that. Odyssey, I found to be a very entertaining game. I thought the dialogue was fun. I thought the characters were great. I'm one of the few people I think who really liked Alexios, even though Cassandra is obviously a fan favorite. And it, but with Valhalla or with Odyssey, it's when I started to feel like, man, this is a long game, and I want to move on with the story right now, but I have to hit level whatever before I can do that. And that level gating really, really, really hurt that experience for me. But I enjoyed it so much, I kept going. And a big twist towards the end of the game, of sorts, was really fun for me, and I thought it was really cool. And that experience was really good. And then Valhalla came out, and I never even got to the English area of it. I never even got out of the prologue. I thought the game kind of looked crappy. I didn't like the way it looked. I was playing on the Series X with the like enhanced version. I thought it looked awful. My experience was very buggy. I found it to be like borderline like cringy. I just didn't like it. I thought the characters were uninspiring. I didn't. The only thing I liked about it was that it seemed like they were trying to bring in like some like legit assassin lore. The Valhalla or Odyssey and Origins was kind of dealing with like the more mystical side and like who like the founders of the Assassin's Order was and all of this like like the people, the civilizations before us and all that, which was interesting, but it just felt like a bit much. And so this Assassin's Creed Mirage, it's supposedly going to take place in Iraq, way back, a couple thousand years ago, or Iraq, I believe is the right pronunciation. And that's great. I think that sounds super cool. And this is not, if in case you didn't know, this is not the Assassin's Creed game that's supposed to be like a live service, like many year game. This is something else. So it seems like that is going to be this big like mothership game that's going to have like a live service element. It's going to go on and on and on with new areas and blah, blah, blah. What you've seen from like Odyssey and Valhalla, especially, where you're going to have experiences like this one, with this Mirage, where this is going to be probably a one and done. They're going to release it and then move on to another like kind of more traditional Assassin's Creed game that will complement this mothership game. I mean, maybe they'll do some DLC or something for Mirage, but I suspect it's going to be a pretty self-contained game. The next story is The Last of Us Part 1 has released. So it's only released on PlayStation. It's going to release on PC as well. But Sony is doing its stuff there. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the reception to this has been very expectedly good. The Metacritic is 89. The OpenCritic is 88. These are both measures out of 100. It seems like basically people are like, yeah, this is one of the best games ever made, and now it looks better, and they improved a lot of accessibility stuff. So thumbs up, good job. Okay. And it was really interesting. I watched multiple reviews on it, and the kind of funny one stood out, as well as some others, as being really interesting to me, because they basically were like, this is a 10 out of 10 game, or 5 out of 5, whatever. This is a perfect game. And then they would spend the next hour pointing out a bunch of stuff that I think if they would have saved their rating for the end, they would have been like, well, maybe it's like a 4 out of 5, or maybe it's like a 9 out of 10. And that's not to like degrade the game at all. It's obviously one of the best stories ever told. It's one of Sony's best games ever made in a lot of people's opinions. But it's kind of that factor of like, if it's, if most of the story elements and stuff are kind of recycled from the old game, even though they did like significant work, like the animations, the characters, the environmental, like all of that is significantly revamped. They did some mechanical stuff, a little bit of AI work, it seems like, but not maybe enough from what I've seen people say. That like are you rating it as like a platform, or are you rating it as an individual game? And that's a question that I've seen multiple of these interviews kind of grapple with and not really come to a conclusion on. Honestly, it seems like they, even they aren't really sure how they feel. So, my opinion on it is, it sure doesn't seem like it should be a $70 game. That seems like a lot, despite the significant overhauls. And it seems like that's a pretty consistent dig on it, is that it shouldn't be $70. But then you ask the question, like, well, should the game's price affect its score? Should the score be purely about the game or about the context it's within? Should a pretty good game that's only $30 get bonus points for that, where a really good game that's 70, should it lose points for that, even though it really has nothing to do with the game, but more the context the game has been released in? I don't have the answers to that. The one thing I will kind of rant about is how I have absolutely zero doubt. I have no faith at all that this game couldn't have come out on PC at the same time. Sony is still so obsessed with console sales. Oddly enough, even though they're, lightening their systems and raising their prices and stuff, them winning the console sales numbers is the most important thing to that company. And we see evidence of that in their resistance to putting games on PC. And when they do, doing it like 3 or 4 years after the game comes out. That does not have to happen. That ports take time. I understand putting a game on PC is hard because you have to know the game can handle a pretty huge variety of different setups and stuff like that. So I get it. But, multi-year waits, or even a situation like The Last of Us, is purely because they want to make sure every person who could buy a system to play this game will. And then once that's completely sapped, then they'll let it go on PC. And maybe it's a bit of a conspiracy theory, I guess. There's only really circumstantial evidence towards that, but I will hold to it. And I don't even blame them, because I understand that they are really stuck in this like kind of old school idea of like, we have to sell the most hardware. Because you can tell that like Xbox gave up on that, and Sony doesn't even sell the most hardware. Nintendo does, but because it's like a different class, I don't think they care. But yeah, it's very interesting. I think that obsession will fade as time goes on. I think PlayStation will be the last one to get the message, but I think they will get it eventually and realize, like, having, focusing on having games, like they obviously have this crazy roster of games, but if you look at the games, they're more alike than they are different. And that's obviously why they've like purchased Destiny and they've been making their own moves, just as Xbox is. And it seems like where Xbox is trying to kind of fill every niche in some capacity, without really being super successful at any of them. Sony kind of has the opposite problem of like having the absolute market on third person open world adventure games with a good story on lock. And that's about it. And so it seems like they're trying to expand out of that fairly small thing, but it works so well for them. It seems like they're almost like kind of terrified to leave it, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens with like when the Last of Us PC version comes out and how Sony handles their PC releases in the future, because the day and day stuff won't happen on Sony until they don't care about console sales anymore. And I don't think that's coming anytime soon. So, speaking of not coming anytime soon, Halo Infinite. So the content woes continue. If you saw their kind of big update this week, it's really tough because like they're trying to be transparent. They're trying to give information when they're able. You can tell they're trying to only give information when they can like be sure it's real information. As being like a big Division fan as well as other games. There's such a fine balance, it seems like, with these PR and comm dev teams were like, they want to get information out ASAP. They also don't want to put out information that ends up not being true. So they don't want to talk about they're working on this new feature and then 2 months later have to come back and say, actually, we can't put that feature in. Because that's very normal in video game development. But, video game development also used to be a studio disappeared for 2-3 years and then a game came out and then people played it. But now people are so obsessed with knowing like every step of the development process and knowing everything that's going on and everything they're thinking about doing. Well, yeah, you want to be transparent about that stuff, but because players don't understand how games are made, and they don't have any ability to understand that not everything that you want to put in a game gets into that game, it puts them in a tough spot where like they have to be so careful about what they show or don't show. Being a Division fan, you've seen this evolution pretty heavily, as well as many other games. So yeah, the Halo situation's tough. They put out the announcement that they are removing the couch co-op that was initially boasted about quite a bit. This current season's gonna last for 10 months, which is not great when some seasons in like Apex and stuff just last a couple weeks and then more stuff comes soon. But they have pretty much confirmed that Forge, the big customizable mode, is coming towards the end of the year. So I think the outrage about the couch co-op was a little silly. Obviously, I'm sure there's a decent number of people who that's still a factor to. It surely can't be enough to matter, though. I mean, I have such a hard time believing that that is really that big of a deal to more than like a few hundred people. And at the end of the day, if you're struggling to get content out, if you're feeling the pressure of the fan base and your bosses and all that to keep trying to bring this game back to what it probably should have been, it's Halo Infinite. You cut things that aren't worth it, and I'm betting that they had metrics to tell them that couch co-op was a super cool idea and it was just not worth it, and that's where it's gonna be. So I enjoyed Halo Infinite. I enjoyed the story a lot. I enjoyed a little bit of multiplayer, mostly big team battle, but I kind of dropped off. I didn't find their battle pass system to be very approachable or fun to interact with. And that was really about it. I'm still playing Apex. I'm still playing Battlefield 2042, believe it or not. And that's filling that thing for me, that live service kind of come and play for a couple hours a day thing. Those games are doing that for me. Where like even like the Division, but especially Halo isn't. And when they have new stuff, like if Halo Infinite puts out a story DLC, day one, I'm playing that. Them putting out this PvP stuff, I don't really care. I'm sure I'll check in when I need to, but I just Halo Infinite's interesting. I've seen a lot of people, especially of a certain lean, really be like, oh, Halo, blah blah blah, like this needed to be perfect and it's not. And I am going to throw out an argument, and maybe this is very convenient in hindsight. I don't think Halo has been the premier franchise for Xbox since Halo 3 came out. I think that title goes to probably Gears of War. And even though I don't think Gears of War is as popular as Halo, I think if you want to point out one of their franchises that is like the best of Xbox, I mean, Gears 5 was so good. I don't even like it. I didn't even play it that much. But I know it's a really good game, and it looks insane. And I think the Coalition and Gears is Xbox's premier franchise at this point. And I think Halo just is something else. I think it's one of the good games they have. There is a lot of question and talk about what's going to happen with 343 after this like third game in a row that isn't really doing it. And I think that Activision acquisition will be very interesting for Halo. I think it's very, very challenging. I find it really hard to believe that they are going to likely acquire the makers of Activision Blizzard, especially, and they've already gotten the ZeniMax thing with, you have these developers who made Doom and Doom Eternal and Call of Duty and all of these games, and you're gonna tell me that you're not gonna use any of those resources to try to make a really cool Halo game? I think that would be crazy. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Speaking of Xbox, the Xbox Game Pass Friends and Family has officially been unveiled. So I think I just spoke about last week that I think in Ireland and Colombia, I believe, they were doing like a beta test for this Friends and Family. You could have 5 accounts on it. I think it was around like $30 a month. And that has now been officially released in those 2 places. And then they've said that it'll come to other areas later. So it's a pretty big deal. If it really is going to be like $30 a month, I mean, that's simply worth it. If you can just find like one or maybe, at least like maybe 2 or 3 people to just split the cost with, it gets you a Game Pass Ultimate for like a really good price for like, maybe less than $10 a month. And that's just a wildly good deal. It just is. And what a lot of this is leading up to is this mythical time when Xbox is going to be putting out like significant titles like every 2 or 3 months. And I know that this has really turned into like almost a meme of being like, well, maybe next year. And that's kind of what it looks like. But there will be a time where Xbox is going to have, like Call of Duty on Game Pass. They're going to have the new Hellblade game coming out. They're going to have more Halo stuff. They're going to have the new Gear 6. They're going to have this and that. They're going to have these like significant titles coming out pretty consistently. And it's going to just seem insane to not have a Game Pass subscription. And if you can share it with a couple people or 5 people total, it just makes it, I think, impossible to not be on, even if you don't have an Xbox, even if you play it through the cloud or play it through like your PC Game Pass or something. I just think that we're going to get to a point where it's going to seem insane to not have Game Pass, even if you're not an Xbox fan. But, we'll just have to see how that works out. Next story is God of War Ragnarok had, they put out a little bit, was it Santa Monica, I think is the Sony studio making that. And they put out a video basically detailing some new features and mechanics and stuff. It was mostly focused on like weapon abilities and combat mechanics. So I watched this little info thing, and my reaction to it was honestly kind of interesting. So I'm an Xbox guy, but I love God of War. I haven't played 2018 yet, and it's on PC, so I can, even though I don't have a Sony, I don't have a PlayStation. But I hate the third person. I hate, like, God of War is a type of game. And I appreciate that this 2018 one, like, I understand. It's like it's a really, really great game. But I hate the way the combat looks. And maybe if I played it, I would change my mind. I don't think I would. I hate the way it looks. I hate the Sonyfication of it, of, okay, well, now it's a linear, over the shoulder, third person action adventure game with a really good story and good voice acting and stuff. Like, it's hard to complain about that, but like, that's not what God of War is, man. And I understand, they had to kind of reboot it and stuff to bring it to a more modern time. Totally understandable. But just for me, someone who played the first, 3 or 4 games, it just isn't, that's not my God of War. And something I've been kind of saying about this next one, I've been saying this for a while, but after Horizon Forbidden West came out, that game was so interesting because it's a very good game. Like, by all accounts, it's a good game, but it wasn't like revolutionary. It was basically Horizon with some more stuff and a lot more Horizon. And I really think that's what God of War is going to be. Now, you're talking about a game that was a game of the year. So more God of War, if Ragnarok is more God of War 2018 with a little bit better graphics and some new mechanics, it's probably going to be a 10 out of 10. I understand that. But it's in the same conversation we've had about like Halo Infinite. If you're talking about this like premier game in this platform's, releases, like Forbidden West, I think that game should have been more ambitious. for what it is, and God of War really should be. And from what I saw, like, I don't think it looked that great. I guess that's what I'm getting at. It just looked, it looked like I was watching DLC from 2018, and that might be what it is. It might be the biggest DLC they've ever made, and that's fine, right? But I just, I think it should be more than that, and it frustrates me because I know, because it's God of War and because it's the sequel to 2018. If there's people who may have, if they looked at it completely objectively, they maybe say it's like, oh yeah, this is really great, it's like an 8 out of 10. It's going to get 10 out of 10s from those people because of the legacy, because of the franchise. And that almost goes back to the Last of Us thing of, are you only, when you're rating games, when you're reviewing games, are you only reviewing that disc or that file, that one experience, or are you rating the price, its legacy, whether it's better or worse than the previous game? And I'm fine with that if you are, but I think you do have to talk about that. There's someone in my Discord who gets really upset about, they've seen the way that, like, certain games are getting reviewed, and they don't like the way that, reviewers aren't very consistent with, like Far Cry 6. Like, this person liked Far Cry 6. And a lot of reviewers kind of panned Far Cry 6 because it was just more Far Cry. And there's this feeling of like, well, if you're only rating that game, like, did you have fun? Is it a fun game? Was it nice to play? And so just because maybe it's more of that game, does that necessarily make it worse? And I think you can have the same conversation of Last of Us, of the new God of War coming out, of Halo, of all these games, of, are you only reviewing that one game in a vacuum? Or are you reviewing its history, its price, its platform, its reception? Are you like, and I think you can do both, but I do think you have to be explicit about that. So there's my thoughts on that. God of War Ragnarok, I doubt it's going to be game of the year. It's so funny seeing people be like, well, God of War is the only game that can challenge Elden Ring. Elden Ring is out and it's a known commodity and it is game of the year. Especially because I think that Ragnarok is going to be like the equivalent to Forbidden West. I would be very interested if that game innovates enough to seem like it should beat Elden Ring, which innovated from their previous formula a lot. Obviously, the From Software formula, but it stepped it up, I would say, quite a bit. I don't believe the next God of War is going to step it up in the same way, but I do think that there will be outside factors that will lead people to potentially want to put that over Elden Ring for Game of the Year. So I'm very interested to see what that conversation looks like at the end of the year, and especially based on who's having it. So we'll have to wait and see. The last kind of general story here is about an impression from a Game Pass game I played. It's Tinykin. This is very quick. If you played Pikmin and you liked it, you should play Tinykin, especially if you have Game Pass. It's adorable. Its art is very cool. Its mechanics are great. It's a fun little game. It's Pikmin. So, I have a video. I have 10 or 12 minutes, I think, on my YouTube if you want to check that out. And you can kind of see how it plays and how it looks. I thought it was very adorable. I can't promise I'm going to finish it because that tends to not happen with me. But it's definitely a game that I will see and be like, hey, that's a good game. And it's definitely one I suggest. Okay, so to kind of break it up here in the middle, if you're enjoying this show and any of my other content, I would ask you to please consider becoming a supporter over at patreon.com/bondiesel. There's a whole bunch of tiers. There's a whole bunch of bonuses. You can check that out for yourself and pick out one that seems to fit for you. Check out all the different perks and all the things that you can get. And I would very much appreciate it. Right now, my main target for that money to go towards is to upgrade my camera and to maybe save up enough to go to E3 next year and cover that live. So if you want to help me with that, go and check it out. If you don't want to support through Patreon, you can be a subscriber over on Twitch at twitch.tv/bondiesel, and other places. So you can check out some of my other content as well. Okay, The Division. Nothing huge this week. We did find, as I record this, phase 2 of the season 10 PTS is ongoing. They put out patch notes. They're basically just refining things. I'm not really going to talk much about it. If you want some more in-depth talk, check out Division Twitter or the subreddit, or the forums. People are talking about the specific changes they've made and how they feel about them. I can't be bothered to play this PTS. I love the game. I hope that the changes are fun and cool, but there's nothing coming that I'm interested in enough to jump in. So I will trust the people who are more interested to really dive in and find some cool stuff. But that is happening. Season 10 is on its way. My guess is it's going to be out by the end of this month. Wouldn't surprise me if it's out within like the next week and a half or so. We'll see how this PTS goes. Obviously, if they have a phase 3, it will probably be the end of the month. There's a lot of Resurgence PR going out. So that mobile game that looks like it's like a borderline like DLC of the first game has kind of clarified. So they were talking about these, like, I think it was like foundry workers or something. We're going to be this new faction that you would fight against, and I just assumed that would be who you were going to fight. Well, now they're putting out PR that's showing that, you know, they're going to have like cleaners and Rikers, and I assume like LMB and maybe even rioters in this game as well. So I'm not really interested in this mobile game even a little bit. I will try it out. I do want to see what it's all about. I can't imagine I'm going to be that interested, but hey, they're putting out a lot of good info, and if you want more Division, it seems like Resurgence is going to be a pretty good place to get it. So, on the other hand, Heartland, we still have not heard anything more about that. There is an Ubisoft Forward on the 10th of this month, which I will be covering. I think you can get drops from watching me too. I'm one of their partnered streamers to do that. So make sure you come by my stream during that show, and we can kind of see what they have to show us. That show has a lot riding on it, man. So we know they're going to talk about like Assassin's Creed. I'm sure they'll talk about Siege. But I we'll see if Division is in there. I think Resurgence will be, because that's probably coming sooner and later. They might talk about Season 10 in there. I doubt it. But if they don't talk about Heartland in this next Ubisoft Forward, I would start to be pretty suspicious about the status of that game. It's very weird. That game, it's very odd. Obviously, I wouldn't give out any privileged information, but purely from the perspective of someone on the outside, it's even more baffling. Maybe, I don't know, but I don't know. I'm fearful for Heartland, if you want me to be honest, and I really am curious to what's happening. But hopefully I'm wrong. We'll have to wait and see. Okay, so with Mass Effect, there was nothing too big this week. I do have a big giveaway coming. So the idea was for this show, for the 200th episode, I had like $300 in BioWare credit from my, if you've ever seen my 20% discount code, it's down in the description. If that one doesn't work, let me know. I'll get you a different one. I get a commission off of that, and at least for now, I can only use it as stored credit. And so I've been using that stored credit to buy like giveaway stuff. So this time I spent like $250 of gift card money to buy a whole bunch of crap to give away. So keep an eye on my Twitter. It's at Bon Diesel or at the EchoCast. I'll be doing the giveaway through Twitter this time. I don't like doing the Gleam stuff anymore. I'm kind of sick of that. It's so predatory, and like 95% of the people who enter those giveaways are bots anyways. So I'd rather just do something on Twitter and still get some engagement out of it, but mostly just, you know, more than anything for me, I think it's a way to get some Mass Effect fans to be like, hey, I'm making content, I'm doing cool stuff. Also, here's a free plushie, right? So be on the lookout for that. My plan with that, because I had some issues buying the stuff, is to probably start the giveaway at the beginning of October and go until N7 day, to try to kind of, it's going to be too late to wrap in like the the episode 200 stuff, the stuff won't be here for a few weeks. And so I think I'm going to do that and try to kind of get off, piggyback off of that N7-day hype. And speaking of N7-day, the one thing I did kind of want to chat about is what I think may come from that, and to kind of have that discussion. So I think N7-day this year is very interesting. So 2 years ago, there wasn't anything that big, but they did have the Game Awards not long after, and that's when they did the teaser trailer that many of us, including myself and a lot of other creators, have come through every frame of and are still coming up with theories about. So they did the teaser trailer confirming the game, that the franchise is continuing despite Andromeda, right? And then last year in 2021, they have done they did a poster. And it was last minute. I remember myself, I remember taking time that day. I was ready and waiting that for work. I had it set up where I could stop working and make a video when they released something. I hoped it would be another trailer, and it was nothing all day until at like 4 o'clock Eastern time. They released, I think Mike Gamble put out a tweet that had this poster, this like concept poster or teaser poster. And, for the last almost year, we've been doing our job with that, speculating and talking about it and arguing about what it means. And this year, I think, is going to be interesting because I think before N7-day, BioWare is going to start really ramping up their talk about Dragon Age. We know that the Dreadwolf game is being developed. The most recent rumors I've heard is that it's going to be out like next fall. So about a year from now, if not a little more or less. And they're going to focus on that, right? Like BioWare, they'll do their teases for Mass Effect. Like they'll still like mention it in their blogs and stuff, but they're gonna give Dreadwolf its time for quite a while. And so I'm kind of curious too if that will impact N7-day at all. My honest prediction for N7-day, they've done a teaser, they've done a poster. I think maybe they would do like a video, like a short like statement from like Mike Gamble, who's the head on the game. Maybe he would do like a video and say, "Hey, we're working on it. We know you want more info. We don't have much to give yet, but we are really excited. And here's a thing." And whether they show like a character that's going to be in it, or they've been so vague with their marketing so far, very smartly, because all of the arguments and all of the the chatter happening, the videos, the Twitch streams, everyone disagreeing about I think it's going to be, they're going to canonize the synthesis ending, or I think they're going to do this, or it's going to be Andromeda 2. All of that chatter, I think it can be a little detrimental to a community of people getting their hopes up, but way more impactful is just so much free PR for BioWare. They are getting so much free advertisement that they are probably okay with us arguing. That's why this year I don't expect to get any like really significant info. But I do think next year is when that will come, about like setting characters, time frames, things like that. I think 2023 is the year, and it's going to be a long wait. Okay, so let's jump into these listener questions. If you have any questions for further episodes, jump into my Discord. You can just comment on the podcast or something I say, and I can respond to it. You can give me a story to talk about. You can just give me a topic to talk about. Or if you have a specific question, you can ask those as well, and I will always include them. But this week, being special because of the 200th episode, I decided to open up kind of like an AMA. You can ask me about anything. And for the most part, people still asked about games. But I will somewhat quickly go through all of these lovely topics that I was given. So the first one is N7 Legend, a very fine fellow who I did an interview with as part of this EchoCast special episode. So make sure to go back and listen to our chat, especially if you're a Mass Effect fan. I think we mostly agree on stuff, but we seem to have different takes, just enough to make it interesting. So go back and check out my episode with N7 Legend. And his comment was, is mayonnaise an instrument? I will say no. I'm going to make that a nice simple one. And I enjoyed the SpongeBob emote that went with this. But seriously, congrats on 200 episodes, dude. And thank you so much. It's been a labor of love, but it's been one of the things I'm the most proud of. Obviously, like my beautiful wife and my amazing daughter, those are pretty high up there. But this podcast is not too far below them. So thank you. Jub, a recent Twitch viewer who has been really great, had a couple questions here. So the first one is, how do you balance gaming and your everyday life? The honest truth is I don't sleep a whole lot. I get 6 or 7 hours a night pretty consistently, but it's definitely a thing of I wake up in the morning, help, especially on the weekdays. I help my wife get my daughter ready. They leave. My daughter goes to my in-laws. I work all day. They get home. I help out. I do what I'm supposed to do. My daughter goes to bed around like 7. My wife goes to bed between like 9 and 10. And then that's when this stuff happens. It is 10:25 p.m. as I record this, and that's how I balance it. And so if I'm not recording the podcast or doing content of some type, that's when I'm playing games. I do try to spend a lot of time from like a content perspective, not always making content or trying to make content from my casual play. Like the what was that silly game? The Tinykin video. You've seen me. I've been doing these videos where I've been uploading this like 4K 60 FPS footage from these Game Pass games that are releasing. And one, I think that's valuable content to someone to kind of get like a 10 or 15 minute preview of a game without me chattering over it. They can just watch it and see if they like it or not. And for me, it's a chance for me. I was going to play it anyways, so I made some content. So I've really tried to cut back on like the purposeful content, streams, podcast, like narrative videos. I even try to do videos where I just kind of riff for like 10 minutes and then put it out, because that's a way for me to feel like I'm putting out stuff that's useful and valuable, but I can still do it in that like 9 o'clock to midnight window I give myself, most days for gaming stuff or content creation stuff. So that's how I balance it. I'm not going to act like it's a great balance. It could be better for sure, but it could be a lot worse, and it has been worse. And I think it's in a pretty good spot right now. And then the second question from Jub was, can you eat in one sitting a statue of yourself made of jelly? No, I could not. That sounds disgusting. So thank you. The OG fan, the OG supporter here, NeuroNix, says, when you started this journey 4.5 years ago, where did you see yourself 5 years later? So 4.5 years ago, when this podcast started, I was pretty recently married. I had gotten into like the Division 1 community a little bit. I was doing like build guides. I was doing the thing, right? I was doing build guides. I was doing screenshots. I was kind of just being introduced to like Twitch and things like that. I don't think I was, I was streaming, but not for very long, only for a few months when I started the podcast. And, it was something new. I'm kind of a homebody. I do like going, I play volleyball. I spend time with my friends and family. But I'm a homebody. I like being home and I like games. And so doing this kind of stuff was very attractive. So doing a podcast, listening to myself talk for an hour, about things I enjoy. I never really knew what would come of it. And what has come of it is a trip to E3, a chance to play a whole bunch of games very early, a few games that have never even come out. It's met me a bunch of people I would have never met otherwise, like yourself, Neuro. And it's really expanded my mind by getting to talk to people from all kinds of places who have different perspectives and thoughts and things about everything. And I find myself almost 5 years later, feeling like very lucky and very happy. Feeling like maybe my time could be allocated a little better for my own health. When I started doing this, I didn't have this extra bit on my chin and my cheeks, and I had a little bit more hair when we started this whole thing. But overall, I find myself in a very good spot. 5 years from now, oh my God, 5 years from now, it'll be 2027. You know, I would like to still be doing this podcast. I think that'd be really cool. I don't really think I ever see this thing becoming like my thing. I think I was too late in the game for that. I don't think I'm good enough at it necessarily. And I don't really think I'm willing to like go all in. But I do think I could continue doing this stuff as like a really serious hobby, a thing that I am passionate about. I'm trying to make better. I'm trying to make successful, more for the challenge than the victory, right? And so, yeah, hopefully 5 years from now, I'm still playing games. I'm still sitting here talking to myself for an hour, and you know, that would be pretty cool. So, thank you for the question. Three Eskimo really took advantage of this, but these I'll make these questions fairly quick. Aisle or window seat on an airplane? Window. I like the aisle because I hate bothering other people. So I don't like being the one who has to climb over other people's legs to get to my seat. But when I flew out to E3, I was in the aisle seat, I think, for a couple of my flights. And I got whacked with the cart twice because I fell asleep. And I think those people intentionally like give you a good pop if you lean out into the aisle if you're sleeping. And so, yeah, so I'll say window. That would be my preference. The last thing I binged on TV or streaming was probably the most recent season of The Boys. I think it was the last thing I like went hard on. And God, it's such a good show. I wish it was not as grotesque so I could like encourage my wife to watch it, because The Boys, in my opinion, is like one of the best written shows, one of the best performed shows like ever made. I think Anthony Starr, who plays the main, he is the antagonist, but it's layered. Man, he's so good at being awful. And then just everyone in that cast is just, yeah, yeah. So that's the last show I binge watched and really, really enjoyed it, for sure. Have you considered doing an ASMR channel or podcast? I believe there was a note here that this was a joke. But there is something funny about it, is that from when I started doing content, and even like my wife, when we met, something that people have always told me is they like my voice for one reason or the other. And I don't get it, because I still hear the same boy who was 11 years old and all squeaky. That's the voice I hear in my head. So the fact that people like my voice has always been weird to me. Yeah, the ASMR thing. I've seen a few ASMR streams on Twitch. I don't think I have the equipment to pull that off. I think there may be some factors that would make me not very popular there. But maybe one day, maybe if this podcast fails, I'll go into an ASMR podcast. And then aren't water guns the coolest? My daughter definitely thinks so, and so I'm inclined to agree. And then, of course, what is your favorite Pokemon? This is going to be super lame because I haven't followed Pokemon since like the original 150, the first gen. It's the Pikachu, man. It's just it's Pikachu for like feels and memories. It's Gyarados, because come on, it's a flying water dragon. Mewtwo is pretty cool. The legendary birds are pretty dope too. It's hard to pick one, but if I had to pick one, it's Pika, man. Pika, for sure. Thank you for the questions, 3 Eskimo. Master Prime, old reliable. This is where I want to throw out a special thank you to Master Prime. Master Prime asks questions almost every single week ever since they started listening to the podcast. And, you know, about 50% of those weeks being the only person who asks questions. And I very, very, very much appreciate Master Prime for listening, for posting and things like that, and giving me stuff to talk about. It's very cool. I really appreciate it. So, So here's Master Prime's questions. Have you ever had a moment where you reconsidered your life? So I didn't take this the wrong way, if I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Master Prime. But Master Prime lives in Mexico, and the upside down question marks and stuff, and kind of me needing to reformat their questions a little sometimes. It makes the fact that they ask questions every single week even cooler. And so I'm going to assume this was like a question of like, has there ever been a moment that's like kind of made you like stop and like rethink things? And there's been a few for sure, good and bad. And I think one of the good and bad ones was when I was 15. I was 15. I think it was the summer after my freshman year of high school, so ninth grade. I was dating a girl who was 2 or 3 years older than me, who could drive and all kinds of stuff. We went to this festival. We were going home on some back roads. I was supposed to be home. I wasn't supposed to leave home that day. And we were on some really curvy roads. She was mad at me for something and wasn't paying attention to the road. We came around the blind corner. Met another car in the middle of the blind corner. Both of us were in the middle of the road. We hit them head on. They didn't move at all. I'll never forget. So in the United States, obviously the driver is on the left side of the car if you're looking out the windshield. And so I was in the passenger seat because I couldn't drive yet. I was only 15, which meant that the driver of the other car was directly in front of me. And one thing that is like seared into my brain forever is I'll never forget how like when I saw the other car, and it goes into slow motion, man, when you're like that freaked out about something. And I'll just never forget locking eyes with the driver of the other car. We just looked right at each other, and her face just like the fear. I'll never forget it. And so we hit them, and they just stopped dead. They weren't dead. They were fine. I don't think anyone in that car got injured. But we like skipped off of their car. We were in a big Jeep Grand Cherokee, and sorry, there was a bug on my mic thing. We skidded sideways after hitting their car and hit grass, which then caused our SUV to start rolling over down a embankment in the woods, because we were on a back road in the country, down a hill. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt, which is definitely something I'm not proud of at all. And that's actually that accident. It plays into your question. And she wasn't wearing one either. And when the accident happened, I grabbed the bar, like the hand grip above my head, and I reached across and grabbed, I think, her seatbelt that she didn't have on. But when you get into a wreck and you slam your brakes on, your seatbelt tightens up. So basically, I had my arm across her chest, and I was holding onto the bar and had my legs like down. And as we were rolling, I just remember like holding her against the seat so she wouldn't fly out of the car, and then holding on so I wouldn't fly out. So we hit the bottom, car's on its side. She was kind of delirious because she got thrown around pretty good. I don't remember having any issues. I don't remember having a headache or anything. My window was open and my window was up facing the sky. And so I basically stood up on the console and like looked around to make sure we were okay, turned off the car, grabbed her, basically pushed her out the window, and when we walked up the hill and we waited for emergency services to come. Luckily there was a house pretty close to the wreck, and it had to have been a pretty loud accident. And they came and checked everyone out, and then my dad showed up, and I was not even supposed to be out of the house that day. And, one thing that has stuck with me is I now wear my seatbelt like religiously. Because of that, I reevaluated some relationships I had at the time. I was young, so it didn't really stick as well as it could have. But one of the biggest things that happened was that my dad, like I think I may have been grounded for a little bit, which was 100% acceptable, like understandable. But it was the fact that he showed concern for my well-being rather than anger at my bad decision that has made me a better father to emulate my dad. And really probably changed a lot for me in that it turned into a thing where like I wasn't scared to tell him when I like messed something up. I came to realize even at a younger age, but especially as a rebellious 15-year-old and teenager, I was kind of a turd in high school. Otherwise, I was a pretty good kid, but high school was a tumultuous time for me. Not too bad, but not the best either. And I think that really made me appreciate him even more to this day. And it has made me the type of father that like I hope my child will come to me if she's in trouble, or to my wife, instead of being scared to get in more trouble, because it's just, that's the kind of dad I want to be. So there you go. There's your moment where if I ever reconsidered my life or thought more about it, that moment was definitely one of the big ones. Second question from Master Prime is, what makes you stay on The Division? Just a love for the franchise, for the developers, for a lot of the people I've met, for the fact that I think it's one of the best games ever made, even if it hasn't been supported the best. That's definitely the big things. And then have the podcast or internet branding in general become part of you, or is it just a hobby? I would say a little bit of both, right? Bon Diesel has a direct connection to me. It's actually a nickname I had in college because one of my coworkers didn't want to say my last name, and he found a different thing to call me, and it was Bon Diesel. It's kind of hard to explain, but it stuck with me, and it was my gamer tag back in college, and I've kind of used it for a lot of stuff ever since, including my kind of name here on the internets. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a hobby. Like, this obviously isn't my full-time job. If it was, I wouldn't be very successful. It would be a rough life. So it's definitely a hobby, but being a podcaster, being a gamer, being a community member, things like that is a part of me for sure. And something I'm really proud of. So, yeah. So thank you for the questions, Master Prime. And again, thank you so much for always participating. It's been really great. Anna the Reth. I always just call you Anna. I've actually never asked you how to say the second part, so correct me the next time I'm on stream and tell me how to say it right. You had a bunch of quick ones for me. I'm not going to do well with this. Top 3 game characters. Commander Shepard. The protagonist from Red Dead and Red Dead 2 tied. I can't pick one. It's just a couple of my favorite games ever. And then a third one that's so hard for me because I really just kind of think about those. I will say, and of course I'm gonna look like an idiot because I can't remember his name, but from season 1 of The Walking Dead, the guy you play as, is it Eli or something? I played that when my daughter was very young, was it summer of 2021, I think. And that whole series of games really touched me, really significantly. But that first season, especially, of seeing that like pseudo father-daughter relationship, and spoilers, but him sacrificing everything at the end for her, and getting her to where she needed to go, and teaching her the lessons she needed for the rest of her life, or at least for the rest of the time you play as her, was really, really meaningful to me. So I would say those are the 3 I can think of off the top of my head. Top 3 game missions or quests. The Fallout 3 Megaton kind of quest and all of the different ways that can play out is one that stands out. The Priority Earth in Mass Effect 3, even though I know it's like a not everyone loves it. To me, it's just every time I get to that mission, I just feel so full of things. That's definitely a big one. What's another good one? Uh, I will say the game Haven. That was like my game of the year in 2020, I think. When This is a game where you and your partner in the game, it's AI, but these two characters. This game was one of the best portrayals of a relationship I've ever seen in a video game. And there's a moment, there's a part of the game where they get separated, and in that part of the game just really struck me. And I remember playing the game. It was just a game, right? But I remember playing it and being like, I have to find them, and doing all the things you had to do to get back to the partner. That will always stick with me. That game is so underrated. It's really a bummer. The game makers, I think is what that studio is called, has made it pretty clear they're moving on to like a new game. I really wanted DLC or even a sequel of Haven, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to happen because they just barely brushed the surface of the lore and the story of that game and those characters. So that bums me out. But it's also one of those things that's like, okay, like I'll take what I can get. That was a cool experience. So yeah, so there's my 3 missions or quest. Top 3 game lore, easily the Division franchise, now the Mass Effect franchise for sure. And even though I haven't played the games, I would say The Last of Us. That's a series I've always really enjoyed watching the playthroughs of and learning more about the story and the lore and kind of the expanded universe and stuff like that. So there's my 3 game lores. My top 3 genres of games: RPGs, real-time strategy like Age of Empires and stuff for sure. And shooters. Those are definitely my top 3 there. And my top 3 indie or AA games. Oh yeah, and you said no repeating of games, which I think I did. So sorry, I tried. My top 3 indie games. So Haven would definitely be. So I'm gonna break your rule. I'm sorry. Haven would definitely be up there. Dead Cells is another big one for me. I'm trying to think. State of Decay. So I know like State of Decay 1, I think would be AA. State of Decay 2, I still think would be, even though they're owned by Microsoft now. I don't think State of Decay 3 is going to be like an indie game or a AA game. I think that's going to be a straight up AAA big time experience. But yeah, so Haven, Dead Cells, and State of Decay. There's my 3. So thank you, Anna, so much for the questions. And Anna's been a big influence in me with my Mass Effect love and getting into that game. And she's been one of many people who have been really great to. She's a Division fan as well, but a big time like Mass Effect fan. So having some people kind of help me feel comfortable in exploring both of those things has been great. And Anna's definitely been one of the biggest there. One of my favorite usernames that has been around a lot lately on YouTube and on Twitter and stuff is Legolas on the Shelf. And so, so I love it. It's so funny. And if you ever look this person up, their profile picture is an elf on a shelf with Legolas's face on it, naturally, as one does. So the comment here was congrats, Bon, or dad advice. Dad advice. If you have some, what do you what do you want to share? I think how I said before about my dad trying to establish early that the truth will always be better than lying. That you may have consequences either way, but to the consequences won't be as bad if you're truthful. For like a baby, for like an infant or something, learn how to swaddle. get them into their own bed as soon as you feel comfortable. Our daughter started sleeping on her own in her own crib in a different room at 6 weeks. And I can count on one hand the number of nights that we've had like bad nights, and only one like really bad one in 3+ years, knock on wood. So just establish, get them into their own room and bed as soon as you're comfortable. And routine. We have changed especially in the first year and a half, we would leave family functions early. We would not go to some things. One of us would go, the other one wouldn't, just to guarantee that little one went down at the same time every night, roughly, and got a nap every day. So there would be family functions. I would leave early to bring her home and put her down for a nap. And she's over 3 years old. She still sleeps like 10 hours a night, and she will take like 2 or 3 hour naps if you let her during the day. And it's awesome. So that is my biggest advice. My next bit of advice is, after that baby's born, you'll be in the hospital for a day or two. The hospital we went to was extremely pushy about nursing. After the birth, my wife didn't make milk for a couple days, and then she made more than we could handle. But the second night, our daughter hadn't really gotten any milk. She hadn't eaten anything, and she screamed all night. And the hospital was very resistant to suggesting formula. So we went through like 7 hours through the night with this little thing screaming, and we couldn't help her. We didn't know what to do. My wife couldn't feed her yet. It was a nightmare. One of them, probably the most tired I've ever been in my entire life. And then at some point, a nurse came in, and I just said, "Hey, I need formula. Give me formula. Like, I need to feed this baby." They gave me formula, popped that thing in her mouth. She drank like the whole thing, which at that age, she should have only been able to drink like half of it, maybe. She chugged the whole bottle, didn't spit up, fell asleep for like 7 hours or longer. She may have slept longer. And then we finally got to sleep too. So consistent sleep schedule, stick with it. And don't be afraid to make them give you food for your baby in the first like 48 hours, because that baby needs to eat. They're hungry. So there's my dad advice. The second part here is maybe times that, so asking about times that gaming and being a dad or husband have overlapped. And Legolas on a Shelf said, "Personally, my wife and I have never yelled at each other more than when we found Overcooked." So that's a really fun cooking game if you're not aware of it. It's kind of what I said before. I help out as much as I can. My wife's probably changed more diapers. I've changed a lot of diapers. I do a lot of our cooking. I do a lot of our cleaning up and a lot of our chores, and I take care of all of our bills. And I really felt like, she did quite a bit of work growing that wonderful little thing. And I felt like even before, but especially after, the least I could do was everything. And so you still need to take care of yourself. You still need to give yourself your own time. And obviously I do that like right now, late at night. And that's just kind of how I roll. And I always have, even before I was married and stuff like that. I was always a night owl. But make sure you're taking care of your business, and then make sure you're taking care of yourself too, because you matter. And yeah, it's really important. So, okay. So the last set of questions here is, from Caged, another more recent, friendly face on the Twitch and and on Twitter and stuff like that. So, a big, Mass Effect fan. They say, "Congrats, Bon. That's awesome about the 200th episode. I'd like to hear your opinion on the Catalyst." This is in reference to the end of Mass Effect 3. "Do you believe it is an unreliable narrator, speaking the truth, or dysfunctional in some way? And then sorry if you've covered this in the past." I don't think I've directly talked about it. So this is a great question to wrap up on. So the Catalyst, if you're not aware of what Mass Effect is, all three games in the original trilogy led up to this battle with these basically unbeatable species of creature that their prerogative was to wipe all technology and technologically advanced races from the entire Milky Way every 50,000 years, because to prevent AI from basically doing it themselves. There's a lot, right? So you discover this weapon that you can build, but it's only half of the weapon. And so throughout the third game, you build this weapon with the help of everyone else, but you have to find the other half. And then you do find the other half. And all along, it was this home base that you've been interacting with since the first game. And so at the end of the game, these are obviously spoilers, you get this thing that you built to the home base. You connect them to finally be the super weapon against these sentient creatures, these whatever, who are there to kill all of the humans and all of the other races, to wipe them all out. And you're given essentially three choices. And that's kind of the reference here is the catalyst is shown to you as this image of a little boy that you saw die at the beginning of the game. It's obviously like a projection of your character's, self-conscious issues or whatever, PTSD, things like that. And so what they tell you is that you have to, they basically tell you the three choices, and it's to destroy all of these creatures. They're called the Reapers. Is to take the option to destroy all the Reapers, but it will also destroy all the AI, everything, which includes a crewmate of yours and an entire race of beings called the Geth, which are robots that are like not really robots. It's a long story. So one option is to destroy all of the Reapers, but also all of these other people. The second option is that your character will sacrifice itself and essentially become the new catalyst who's in charge of all the Reapers. And so you can sacrifice yourself and become the boss of the Reapers and do whatever you want. You can send them off back to deep space to be gone forever. You can have them help rebuild everything, whatever you want. You could become evil and become just as bad as the catalyst, whatever. And then the third choice is that you sacrifice yourself and combine all AI and all organic beings into one, into this big harmonious galaxy where everyone gets along. And so to me, the obvious choice has always been the destroy ending, because the other choices seem like what the Reapers would want you to do because they still get to exist. And part of this catalyst, this AI that is trying to help you decide what to do or persuade you, tells you, well, you're going to kill off this entire race of people. One of your crewmates is going to die because they're an AI. Even your own character, Commander Shepard, is like significantly infused with AI and mechanical bits and parts. And it says like you're going to die too. Like you're one of them, or at least partly. And so what Cage is asking is, do you think that there's a big theory in the community that the catalyst is lying? It wants you to pick the control or the synthesis ending so they can essentially continue to exist. Or if you choose destroy, they don't, because everything gets blown up. And I think they are being manipulative, but mostly honest. Or I at least think the three choices are honest. I think all of the information that the catalyst tells you beyond that is very pushy, trying to get you to pick the endings that would be best for them. Because like I would argue that the control ending especially, but even the synthesis ending is like still like kind of handing a win to the Reapers. In my opinion, that's why I always pick destroy. I've tried to get myself to pick other endings. I'm literally on a renegade run right now where I won't get the 7400 EMS I need to save Shep. And if I couldn't do that, I was going to pick one of the other endings. I don't think I can do it. I just don't think I can do it. I'll see when it comes down to that, which I may actually be playing tomorrow or sometime soon on stream. But I think they are, I would say an unreliable narrator is the best descriptor of what I think. I think the basic premise of what the catalyst tells Commander Shepard is true. but I think it has a lot of bias in it. This again just comes down to the whole idea that I've talked a lot about of like, I do not envy the writers of this next Mass Effect game at all, because I think the best way for them to handle the game moving forward is to pick a canon ending, which I think should be the destroy ending, and to just move on from there. But they're gonna make it's gonna be interesting. So it's a very good question, Cage. It may even be a good thing to make a whole video on at some point. So thank you for that. And that was all of the questions. Thank you so much to everyone who participated. That was really awesome. It's nice to get to answer all of those. We're going to hit some content updates and then wrap this wonderful 200th episode up. I do have a bunch of videos coming up. I've posted a video a day for almost over a month at this point. Kind of not on purpose. What I was talking about before, becoming efficient with my content, putting out some purposeful stuff, putting out some other stuff that's just a part of what I'm doing anyways. It's been great. So please check that stuff out. I would really appreciate it. I have a couple new videos coming out soon where I just put out one talking about like, are games really fun anymore? Has that been ruined? A bunch of Mass Effect videos. When season 10 of The Division comes out, I'll probably do a video about that as well. So keep an eye out for all of that. I'm also working on getting more interviews scheduled. I have 2 or 3 that are like tentatively confirmed at this point, but we need days and times. So I'm working on that. And so keep an eye out for all of those. So that's where we're going to wrap this thing up. Again, thank you guys so much, guys and gals and everyone else, for listening, for, checking out my stuff and sharing it and interacting and supporting on Patreon or on Twitch or wherever, whether you just watch or listen or share or contribute. I appreciate every single part of it. So let's wrap this baby up. Please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast provider, and don't forget to rate the podcast on Spotify or iTunes. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and leave a comment down below, either with a comment, a question, or maybe to just help the algorithm. You can find me all over the internet as Bond Diesel, including on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and on Twitch. And that is all I have. So until next time.